Hi everyone, hi there, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to take a look at this weird emblem located on the side of Ħal Saflieni Hypogeum, which is the oldest underground necropolis in the world. This megalithic structure dates back some 6,000 years. But what about this emblem? Where does it come from, and why is it even here? Is it just a random symbol? Or could it have something more to do with the site itself? You'll find out in today's episode. So let's get started. The Hypogeum emblem. As you can see, the emblem is located right next to one of the entrances into the Hypogeum and consists of two concentric circles with a spiral in between them. The outer circle has 24 points, while the inner one has only 8. It looks quite intriguing, and honestly, if you didn't know any better, you might assume that it has something to do with the site itself. Unfortunately, that's not really the case. So where did it come from then? Well, it was designed by an architect named Renzo Piano and was created in 1998. And what is he famous for? Well, besides designing the Hypogeum emblem, Piano is also famous for designing one of the most recognizable buildings in the world, the Pompidou Center in Paris. But obviously, that's not why you clicked on this video. You want to know about the emblem. So let's take a deeper look into its design. As I mentioned before, the emblem consists of two concentric circles with a spiral in between them. Let's start with the bigger outer circle. This circle represents the sun, and the 24 points represent the hours of the day. The inner circle, on the other hand, represents the moon, and the 8 points represent the phases of the moon. In total, we get 32 points, which also happens to be the sum of the 24 hours of the day and the 8 phases of the moon. Coincidence? Who knows? But that's definitely not the interesting part. You see, these two circles aren't exactly concentric, meaning they don't share the same center point. Instead, they are rotated with respect to each other. And when you pay close attention, you will see that they intersect at 4 points. These 4 points form a sort of cross. And that's the interesting part, because the Maltese emblem is also a cross. Not just any cross, mind you, but a George cross. Why is it called like that? Well, it's named after Saint George, who is the patron saint of Malta. This cross was first adopted by the Knights of St. John in 1530 and is still used by the modern-day Republic of Malta. But why did the Knights adopt this particular cross? Well, it's probably because they associated St. George with their fight against the infidels, especially since the Crusades were at their peak during the time. The Knights were fighting in the Holy Land. The Knights of St. John were actually very successful in battle, so much so that they managed to capture the city of Jerusalem twice. Of course, they never kept it for long, but hey, at least they got it. But why does the emblem have to include a George cross? Well, it doesn't. It's just an artistic decision made by Renzo Piano. He probably thought that it would be cool to have the emblem match the Maltese flag. But in reality, it just makes everything more confusing. After all, this is supposed to be an emblem of Ħal Saflieni, not the country of Malta. It gets worse though, because the emblem isn't even located in Malta. It's located in Poala, a town which is a stone's throw away from Ħal Saflieni. In fact, it's so close that if you had your eyes closed, you wouldn't notice the difference. In theory, this should make sense, since both the town and the Hypogeum are part of the same district, called Il Castello. But once again, this is just another one of those coincidences. So we now know who designed the emblem, why it has 24 and 8 points, and why it includes a George cross. But what about its location? Why is it located near a small town instead of the actual archaeological site? Well, the simple answer is that the architect wanted to put it somewhere where people would actually see it. And what better place than a large plaza in front of a train station? I mean, hundreds of thousands of people pass through this square every single year, if not millions. And that's true. But that doesn't explain why the architect chose this particular spot. After all, there are plenty of other plazas in Poala which receive just as many people. So why this one? Well, that's because the architect wanted to emphasize the connection between the past and the present. And what better way to do that than by placing the emblem in front of a train station? Trains are usually associated with the modern world, whereas the hypogeum is associated with ancient times. Therefore, by placing this emblem right in between the two, one can argue that he created a link between the two worlds. And honestly, that's probably the best explanation we are ever gonna get. Of course, that doesn't change the fact that this is an extremely weird thing to do. I mean, if you ever visit Ħal Saflieni, you won't be able to tell that the emblem actually exists. And that's exactly what confuses most visitors. Most people have no idea that this strange-looking emblem has anything to do with the hypogeum. And even if they did, they wouldn't know that it was intentionally placed there to connect the past and the present. And what's worse is that this emblem is often mistaken for a portal or a gateway. And the reason for that is pretty obvious. Just look at it. It looks like something straight out of a fantasy novel, like something you would see in Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones. But unfortunately, there is nothing behind this emblem. It's just a wall. Some say that this is a disgrace to the hypogeum, but others disagree. They say that it's actually quite clever because it attracts more tourists to the area and thus helps to preserve the hypogeum. If you ask me, I am somewhere in between the two. On one hand, I completely agree that it's a shame to have such a bizarre emblem in such a sacred place. At the same time, I understand why it was done. When you think about it, Ħal Saflieni is not just a collection of underground tombs. It's also a testament to human ingenuity. I mean, how else do you explain the fact that humans managed to build such a complex structure 6,000 years ago? Back then, they didn't have any modern tools, no concrete or steel, and yet they managed to build something that still stands to this day. The problem with the emblem is that it kind of overshadows the hypogeum. Sure, it brings more tourists to the area, but most of them don't even bother to go inside. They just stand outside, taking pictures of the emblem, and then move on. And that's a real shame because Ħal Saflieni is one of the most important archaeological sites in the Mediterranean. It's older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids of Giza, and yet it receives far fewer visitors. If you ask me, the emblem was a bad idea, but not a terrible one. Yes, it's strange, and yes, it's confusing, but it's also a work of art. I mean, if you look at it from a distance, it actually looks quite nice. And that's exactly what Renzo Piano intended. He wanted to create something that would catch people's attention and make them think, and I think he definitely achieved that. In conclusion, the hypogeum emblem is an interesting piece of art that was created by the architect Renzo Piano. It consists of two concentric circles, with a spiral in between them. The outer circle represents the sun, and the 8 points represent the phases of the moon. The inner circle, on the other hand, represents the moon, and the 8 points represent the hours of the day. Together they form a sort of cross, which is also found on the Maltese flag. The emblem is located in Paola, a town which is a stone's throw away from Ħal Saflieni. It was purposely placed there by the architect to symbolize the connection between the past and the present. The emblem has been mistaken for a portal or a gateway, which is understandable given its unique design. While some believe that it's a disgrace to the hypogeum, others believe that it's clever and helps to bring in more tourists. Personally, I am somewhere in between the two. Thank you so much for watching this video. Subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.